I'm going to come back to you in just a few minutes, but first I want to talk to the Communities and Housing Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick. Robert, very good to see you on what's been a very important day for you. You know,
Hi, good evening.
We've got this tragedy of many buildings still having this very dangerous cladding, the cladding that led to so many deaths in the Grenfell Tower conflagration. What, for you, is the importance of 18 metres when it comes to giving full government compensation for the cost of replacing the cladding? I'm talking about 18 metres high, these buildings.
That's right. Well, all the expert advice that I've received and my predecessors, going back to Sajid Javid and Theresa May in the immediate aftermath of the fire, all the expert advisors say that height is the main driver of risk of fires, risk of fatalities in those fires. And that 18 metres, the traditional definition of a high-rise building, that's 6 stories, is the best place to draw the line. And so the advisors have constantly said to us, focus government effort and resources on making sure that you get the dangerous cladding, the unsafe cladding, off those buildings, and so that's what we've done.
But Mr. Jenrick, hang on. But nobody knows more. But nobody knows more about fire risk than firefighters. The Fire Brigades Union has said again today that they see a significant risk of fire for buildings lower than 18 metres high. Why are you ignoring those experts? Those are experts.
The government's principal advisor, Dame Judith Hackett, who wrote the report into the regulatory regime after the Grenfell fire, she's in fact said this afternoon that she supports this approach. The risk of a fatal fire is 4 times higher in a building over 18 metres than those which are low or medium rise, traditionally defined as 11 to 18 metres. And so the expert opinion, the body of expert opinion, overwhelmingly supports the idea that you should focus effort on high-rise buildings. Actually, 6 stories is not particularly high. It's not what most people would consider a high-rise building in the sense of a tower block like the Grenfell Tower. And actually, in the immediate aftermath of the fire, many people urged us to focus on buildings significantly taller than that. We're not saying that there isn't any remediation to be done in lower-rise buildings. Actually, we've been clear that there will be some instances, far less likely, but some instances where you would want to remediate certain types of cladding. And so we have also provided support for those leaseholders as well. So for those over 18 metres, the government will step in if the building owners don't pay, and we'll cover the whole of the cost. But for lower rise buildings, we're going to create a financing option where no leaseholder will have to pay more than £50 a month. And I think that's a fair but it wasn't the fault
of those leaseholders that it turns out that through poor government regulation, you know, they've got cladding that needs to be removed. Why should those leaseholders, even in smaller buildings, have to pay anything?
Well, the primary fault here is with the people who put the cladding on the buildings. This is about the industry, and we're ensuring that the industry do pay a fair contribution. We want them to be paying to remediate the building, but where that isn't happening, we're going to step in and we're going to help to recoup some of the money for the taxpayer by, for the first time, bringing in levies and taxes, taxes on those developers. So we will be making progress in that respect. But the balance to be struck here is between the interests of the leaseholders, and all of us have immense sympathy with them, and those of the broader taxpayer, of course, many of whom are not homeowners at all. And what I'm proposing today is that the taxpayer pays over £5 billion plus the financing scheme, which itself will no doubt cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds. So somewhere between £5 and £10 billion of taxpayer support to resolve this issue. And I think that most fair-minded people would think that that is a reasonable way forward, doing our best to support leaseholders, making sure that the industry pays its fair share, and of course putting in place a much more rigorous regulatory regime so this sort of thing never happens again.
Secretary of State, I've got tons more I want to ask you, so please don't go away. And all of you at home, come back soon. We've got more to talk about, you know, the aftermath of the Grenfell tragedy, much more on COVID, with Secretary of State Robert Jenrick, Nick Timothy and Liz Kendall. See you in a second. Hello, I'm delighted that the Housing and Communities Secretary Robert Jenrick is still with me. We're talking about about this tragedy for many people of living in these buildings, which in some cases are actually almost unsellable because of the work they need to do to remove the cladding. Can I just ask you, on this cheap loans that you're providing, where you say that the leaseholders would not be paying, you say, more than £50 a month to replace the cladding, do you have any sense of for how many years they might be paying that £50 a month?
Well, we're going to set out more details soon, but the idea is that these are long tenure loans. They don't actually sit with the individual at all. They sit with the building, and so they don't have impact on someone's credit rating or your own personal finances. They're a bit like a ground rent, I'd describe them, and we're going to cap them at £50 a month.
But
600
quid, you've got to accept 600 quid
that is a pretty affordable amount of money.
Well, except 600 quid actually for many people a year is a lot of money, and you know these are properties that have fallen significantly in value.
That question.
Yeah.
The problem today is that in this group of leaseholders who are in buildings 11 to 18 metres, they're very, very worried that they're going to have massive unmanageable costs, you know, life-changing bills. And so I think to go from that position to the certainty of knowing that the worst case scenario for you to get the cladding off your building would be a £50 a month charge is a huge step forwards. That provides confidence and certainty to you as an individual, but it also means that your property should be able to be sold. Lenders should feel more comfortable lending against it. And all of the big retail banks have spoken to the Chancellor and I in the last few days and said that they strongly support this proposal and, of course, the £5 billion to get cladding off the high-rise buildings as well. So I think, although it's very early days, we will start to see a gradual recovery in this part of the housing market as a result of the big intervention that we've done today. I
mean, there are still, you know, 80,000, maybe more than that, people who are still desperately worried. The values of their properties have collapsed, and I think they don't really understand why you've helped, you know, those in high rise and not them. I think,
Rob, on that point, we have to follow the expert advice, and we've got to take a proportionate risk-based approach. And all of the experts say that 18 metres is the right approach.
Okay, you have said that already.
It is just worth emphasising this point, if I may.
Right.
Below 18 metres, the risk is much lower.
But the financial cost is huge. But the financial cost is huge to people who
will not require anything at all.
No, but the financial cost of many of these people, even at £50 a month, is still it's a lot of money. The value of their properties has fallen. They broadly take the view this is poor regulation, not their fault. But look, I do need to move on. Timothy, Liz, do you think the government is doing enough to help people whose lives have been blighted by this cladding scandal?
No, and I've seen this in my own constituency. Look, I just think that Mr. Jenrick is completely out of touch with most people's lives. I have a development in my constituency where people are desperately worried about the cladding. It's under 18 metres. They haven't been able to move, get mortgages or insurance, and many of them work for the NHS, are doctors or nurses or other key workers. And £50 a month might not be that much, Robert Jenrick, but it is a huge amount for my constituents, and they simply cannot understand the difference between 1 metre, why they should get help in one situation and not the other. You know, I know a lot of Conservative backbenchers too who are extremely angry that there have been these broken promises for many leaseholders. So I think the government is going to have to return to this and sort it out.
I mean, Nick, do you understand the distinction that the Secretary of State is trying to make between 18 metres and just under 18 metres? I mean, there are lots and lots of people, including, as Liz says, some Tory MPs, who just think it's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think he talked about trying to balance the interests of leaseholders and the interests of taxpayers, and clearly between the Treasury and between his department there has been some kind of tussle, and there is a finite amount of money to spend on this, and so they've had to work out where is a fair place to draw the line. I mean, it seems to me that this is a classic example of where actually the government could spend the money up front, get this done quickly, and try to recover costs later through taxing property developers some of the freeholders of these businesses, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, I can't remember whether you coined the phrase "the just about managing people," but it was certainly associated with your time in Downing Street. And it's certainly important, Boris Johnson would say, that he connects with those people if he's going to continue to win elections. I mean, surely this is a policy where he's somewhat letting those people down, isn't he, Nick?
Well, I mean, we'll see how this policy works in practice, and we'll see how the government responds to it. But I mean, it is certainly the case that a lot of the people caught up with this are people who have done, everything right, everything society asks of them. They've worked hard. They've managed to get themselves onto the property ladder. And now they find themselves in a situation where they're going to have increased bills, and in some cases they may not be able to sell their properties. And nobody wants people who have worked hard, done the right thing, to experience those things. So that's why I think there might be a different way of doing this.